one of the things I like about my job is that every day is interesting. Today I'm talking about designing a course. Forgot what I did yesterday, but I remember the other day I was resolving. I have a quota of something like 30 cases that I must resolve every week. So one day I'm resolving cases. The other time I was with a dialogue with farmers. The day after, within the same day, I'm talking about support services. And now is I go back to my first love, which is essentially teaching. So what I'm going to present to you today is we're going to go to the back room of what happens when you're preparing a blended learning program or a course that you deliver under a blended learning program. All right, so you might be wondering where I'm coming from. So let me try to situate you where I'm coming from. Okay, in my past life, I was working in the university. So my job as the Vice Dean of the College of Law, which is a new College of Law, was to essentially set up the entire curriculum for the 4-year course. So to do this, before I was a teacher, I was primarily, before I was a teacher in the higher education, I was primarily a lawyer. So where I'm coming from is essentially from teaching law, putting up a curriculum. But my first job after I graduated from college here in UP was a high school teacher. So while I was a high school teacher for 1 year, the principal that we had at the time was obsessive compulsive about lesson plans. As in every week, because we were just new graduates, I was teaching economics and world history. Every week she would make sure that the new teachers always had their lesson plans ready. So for 1 year, I had nothing but lesson plans on economics and world history. And I totally forgot about that in 1984 when I entered the law school. I realized that the lesson plans are very important in trying to determine what was it that your teacher was trying to drive at. So in the UP College of Law, while the teacher frowned upon using the textbook of Paras, who was looked down in the UP College of Law as a lesser being than Professor Arturo Tolentino, because they prescribed Tolentino, I realized that all his questions were coming in from Paras. He banned Paras in the school, in the classroom. He would throw the Paras book. But in reality, he was using Paras and at that time Kagiwa. But he prescribed Tolentino. So when we realized that he was using Paras, we never brought the Paras book to the classroom. But we made sure that we read Paras before we went to the classroom, because that is how he got that is where he got the way he presented it and the way he understood it. So using the lesson plan is very important in trying to determine what is a teacher trying to drive at. Now the same thing is going to happen to us when we develop these courses. Unlike the typical course that we will be deploying in a brick and mortar school, when the dean and the professor talks to you about the course that you will teach, it is most probably part already of a curriculum, which is what you have here, the Masters in Public Ad. But pretty much what you're going to do in your course, aside from the learning objectives that you discuss with the dean or with the curriculum committee, is really up to you. So many times, the dean will never know what you do inside the classroom. In fact, it is almost insulting. It is in fact insulting for an assistant professor or an associate professor or a professor for the dean to sit at the back of the class. It just isn't done in higher ed. In basic ed, it's normal for us. In basic ed, it's normal for us for the principal to sit at the back or for the subject matter expert to sit at the back and to look as to whether or not we are following the basic education curriculum that you find in DepEd ed or you find in a grade school or a high school, but not so in higher education. So what happens then? I'm not saying that teachers are bad in higher ed. All I'm saying is, essentially, when you deploy a higher ed course, which is what we're going to be deploying here, what happens in the classroom is pretty much a black hole. It's pretty much a black hole. Now, you're going to get reputation of teachers, like when you go to a master's class or undergrad, you get rumors. So, who's the good teacher, who's not a good teacher, sinong tamad, so sinong marami requirements. So, in the law school, since I was a working student, my fourth year was really made up of electives because I didn't want to take any review classes because by that time I was working. So, I looked for a teacher who would have a paper that I will have to submit at the end. I'll pass. And in the law school, what mattered was not the number, what was not the course during my time, but the number of units. So I managed to finish my 154 units with esoteric subjects like special problems in corporate law, settlement of international disputes, which really had nothing to do with the bar exam. But in a blended learning program, it just can't work that way. So the challenge for us, if we're going to write a course, develop a course, or to help our senior faculty develop a course, you have to be able to plan it well. You cannot allow a black hole to happen. Why? Because the moment you let go of them, of the students on the online or in the internet, there's not much you can do. Now, so let's go through the assumptions that we have for this particular course. We have 32 instruction hours per course, but 24 hours of the 32 instruction hours is actually going to be delivered face-to-face, which means during the residential period. So while we have 32 instruction hours per course, since you only have 8 hours spread over 4 months, it really depends upon the instructor or the professor now. This may actually go beyond 32. You may actually go to around 42 or even 45 because you spread out the 32 minus 24 is how much? 6. The 8 hours spread over 4 months. So kung 4 months yon at 1 hour a week ka, ibig sabihin ng 4 times 4, may 16 hours ka doon for na pwede mong paglaruan. Kung 4 subjects, pwede mo 6, tama ba yan? 4 times 4, 16 hours. 4 hours times 4 hours, tama, 16 hours. So you can actually spread out the 8 hours and do it in one go or spread it out over 16 weeks. That is something that your curriculum director will have to work out. But the challenge here is that the 24 instruction hours that you have, unlike in a brick and mortar, is going to be compressed in 2 weeks. What does that mean? Kung meron kang 2 weeks, 24 hours, 24 divided by 6 is 4. That's 4 hours. That's 4 hours spread over kung pinati mo lang yung 2 weeks into 2 subjects and then 2 subjects. Kung ginawa mong 4 subjects, in-spread out mo, medyo mahaba-haba yun, 2 hours per day. But maraming blending na pwedeng gawin doon, and that will be a function of the professor. So for example, in a spread of 6 days, 8 hours a day, that's 48. You're doing 4 subjects, that's 12. You will have to determine what works best. It will be a function of the availability of the professor, and the other thing that you have to look at is the preparation time of the students. Because we're not just, when we talk about instruction hours, we're not just talking about the time when the teacher faces the student. You're talking about the time the teacher faces the student and the quality of interaction you can have. If your objective is simply banking, meaning the head of the student is like a receptacle that I can open it and then pour everything there, then that's fine. But if you want a situation where there is interaction, then you'll have to consider how much preparation time will the student have and how much time between classes within the 2 weeks will he or she have in order for that interaction to happen between the teacher and the student. That is why, if you're going to do this, we might have a need to adjust the first residency period. There are 4 courses per semester. The online component is equivalent to 8 instruction hours only. But I think you're going to find yourself doing a little bit more because you may not be able to do everything you want to do in the face-to-face. Okay, so let's go to preparing the syllabus. I'm going to show you samples of the syllabus. Don't rush it because I'm going to give you a copy of the syllabus itself, the syllabi, so that you can look at it and see. When you look at the syllabi in a blended learning program, you realize it's very different from the syllabi that you might find in a brick and mortar syllabus. Why? And you'll see that later. Okay, so what is critical about the syllabus? You cannot wait for the day one of the class. You cannot. Everything in blended learning program is done way in advance. So that means that they are distributed before the residential period. You need to revisit the calendar if you want to deploy in November because you want to have the readings ready. Physically, you have to send this out to them before they go to the residency because you need some reading period for them. One possibility there is that there are several possibilities. You can send it to them way before, meaning put it in a packet, put it in a CD, and send it to them, which are photocopies of the excerpts of the books that you want to assign or the journal articles that you want to assign. The second option is you don't give it to them, you actually bring them earlier in the residency period, and you actually force them to go to one room, and you actually make them read. And then you have all the group dynamics activities towards, it's like running a seminary or whatever, let's say, for if you have 3 days reading period. On the day one, they get to know each other, they stop, everyone goes to the library. Pagdating ng hapon, yung panahon na makakatulog, you bring them back together, they get to know you, how's your mom, how's your dad, how many kids do you have, blah, 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 what's your favorite color. Stop again, you send them back to the library, and then in the evening, you have a little dancing, a little karaoke, then you stop, and then the next day is reading again. You could do that. You could structure it that way so that all the prep, like for example, how to use the LMS, that you can put there. But then you allow them large chunks of period to study. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to simply send the materials to them and tell them that, send it to them 2-3 weeks before and tell them, you've got to have this, you've got to have read this by the time you face the residency and have all your group dynamics compressed in a day. So those are two designs that you can look at. Either you do the group die 1 day, 2 days, so getting to know you, how to use the LMS, all the administrative matters before they go to class, and then you actually have large chunks of time to read. Why do you want them to do that? Well, because precisely the residency period compresses the time, the 24 hours, the 24 instruction hours in 2 weeks. You don't want the professors to go to class, talk about the concept, and the students have never read the readings that they are supposed to have read. So there will be no interaction. Unless the style of the professors, he does not want the students to have read anything, then that's possible. But most professors, I imagine, would appreciate it if they were to talk about concepts in class and they realize that the student actually read parts or grasps parts of the concept that he's talking about, because that's the only way you can have interaction, particularly when you're talking and teaching adults. Particularly when you're teaching adults. That's what you want to achieve. Of course, if you're teaching grade 1 or grade 2, it might be a little bit different because if we're talking about the basic 3 R's, you want repetition to be able to hone a particular skill. So if you want reading, you want repetition, 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 and you want face-to-face, and you want the students to be able to repeat that to you all the time, or you're teaching math. And then, that's why in grade 1, grade 2, you have play and repetition. So the key to the skills that you want to teach in grade 1 and grade 2 is repetition of a particular skill. That's why you have Kumon. That's why you have NOP. I know this because I have grade 2 and grade 4 kids. I still tutor them in math once in a while. So it's repetition is the key. But when you're talking about higher education, what you want is for them to grasp the concept and to be able to apply it to what they have. So that the process that you have is more constructive than simply teaching them and banking whatever they have. Because it's not repetition that you're after here. You're after knowledge, skills, and attitude that you want to inculcate. So that's why you want a reading period. And you have to manage that reading period as much as you can. In the program that I went through, we did not have the luxury of having a 3-day period where we would have the reading period. They sent the materials to us, I think 2 to 3 weeks before. And in my case, I did my reading during the 15-hour plane trip going to the US. Of course, I went to UP and photocopied everything and had it in my computer and some in hard copy, and that's what I read on the plane and the night before. So I really crammed. It wasn't a very good preparation, to the point that the teachers decided to adjust the schedule to give us all one day time to read, because they realized that none of us read. So in the residency period, you've got to have that. Okay, so when you prepare the syllabus, you want the required and optional readings to be clearly identified. All right, you want to have the readings that you want to do, and you want the pages there so people can forecast what they want to read. Now, why am I OC about pages? In the brick and mortar, it's so normal. You just give the number of pages because you want them to read it. Because, you see, the problem here is that you want to be able to determine how much time will a student really need to be able to read that. So many times, what some teachers do is that they actually look at the number of words and try to look at what the standard is in terms of reading for comprehension, and trying to ask themselves, how much time will it take the student to read this? The other thing is, some teachers are so lazy, they decide to give 10 to 15 readings. It's like law school. When you're a freshman in the law school, the teacher will shock you with assigning 30 cases, knowing fully well it's physically impossible for you to read the 30 cases from today until tomorrow. Why do they do it? Wala lang, trip lang namin. Bakit namin trip? Kasi gusto namin kayong masyak. That's what the law school is all about. We're not here to make people quit. We're here to make people learn. So what do you do? Well, in my case, when I teach in the law school, I normally give around 5 or 10 cases for that day. And I tell my students, the 5 you must. The other 5 will get you extra points if you're able to correlate the last 5 to the first 5. If you don't do it, you most will probably be able to guess. But if you can cite the case on the next 5, you'll get a better grade. Why do you want to do that? You want the students to concentrate on what it is essential that they need to learn and what is the optional readings that they want to have. So, when you handle the professors that you will help, you've got to drive them to the point and ask them that if for this particular 2-hour slot in that residency period, which readings here are really important for you to be able to communicate and interact with your students at the basic level, and which one is an add-on. Kumbaga man sa ulam, alin yung patis, alin yung suka, alin yung ketchup, alin talaga yung ulam. If you don't do that, you will find yourself, 2 things will happen. Your learner is going to be very frustrated because they can't do it. Or number 2, your teacher is going to be so frustrated because he or she did not point out what is it that ought to be read, that interaction will not happen in that limited 24-hour period during that 2-week period. You can afford to do this in the brick and mortar school because you have a 1-hour class, 2-hour class today, and if you notice that you're not connecting to this guy, he's having a blank stare while chewing his gum, you can say, okay, I'm going to adjust it in the next meeting. You will not have such luxury in the blended learning program. So you've got to pin down what is essential, what is optional, what is it that you want to be able to do there. Okay. The other thing is, after you've done the required and optional readings, the other thing about the courses, particularly in master's courses or master's level courses, is that you really don't have a textbook. Very seldom will you find a course with one textbook. Unless possibly in the MBA, where there is such a wide demand for MBA that there is, since a big demand, a large supply of professors who write textbooks for MBA. So you'll have MBA marketing level, marketing management for MBA, etc., etc. But for other courses, which are heavily customized, you most probably won't really find one textbook that the professor will say, this is what I want. You won't. Very seldom. Except, like I said, MBA and the other master's level courses, possibly, well, of course, the law school. The law students and the law professors are notorious for coming up with one of the worst textbooks around. Have you ever seen a law book? Walang index, ang sama ng presentation, hindi pinag-aralan kung paano mapatutunan ng estudyante yung kanilang textbook. It's poorly written. Tapos mahal. Kasi LLBJD siya. Don't think that I don't like lawyers. I like lawyers. They're just my favorite whipping boys and what's wrong in the classroom. So let's go to the third point is guide questions are prepared for each module. Why do you want to do this? In the normal syllabi that you will have in the higher education level, you'll just have the reading at bahala ka na kung anong gagawin mo dun sa reading. Again, why? Because like I said, in the brick and mortar, you have the luxury of adjusting. In the blended program, you won't. So what we do in the blended learning program is we prepare guide questions for each and every module. Why? Because you want to tell your student already what is it that you want to look for. You're not telling them the whole thing, but then you want them what are the things that you want to pick up from the readings that you will have in the optional and in the required reading. I'll give you the examples to this later. The guide questions can be very specific, and I will go back to how do you prepare these guide questions. The fourth point in preparing the syllabus is because you will not have time the moment you deploy it, you can't recall it, is that you already have built-in activities for individuals and groups. They are all pre-designed. When I say pre-designed for individuals, you know before you begin when the individual paper is going to be due, what the topic is going to be all about, when is the group going to do that. Why do you need that? You need that because the moment you let your students disappear and they separate, you will have the only chance they will have to be able to plan their whole semester is while they're together in the residency period. You cannot, in the middle of the online component, say, I want to have an extra paper done. You can't. Why? Because they're all out. You have to pre-plan all the activities that you need to do in the group. And I'll give you examples of the activities later. Assessment standards are clear and predetermined is something that we all want. All the deans and all the department chairs all tell the professor that when you do your syllabus, make sure that you tell the students what is the basis for assessment. But then again, a lot of teachers still fail to do this. They do not put together what is the basis for the assessment at the end of the semester. So that's very clear. Okay. Another unique thing about blended learning programs is that the loads of different courses are considered. Again, I'll go back to the law school. In the law school, we had a problem in the law school before because one teacher would assign 30 cases, another one would assign 50 cases, another one would assign 5 or 6 cases. All in one, let's say in they had 3 units, 3 subjects, 3 courses. And so, why? Because, well, the teacher is supreme in his class. He can do what he likes. The problem there is that you will find people who will not, you will find that the students cannot cope. It's impossible for them to cope given the load that the different professors gave. In a blended learning program, because of the time constraint and the distance in geography of where they are, you will have no choice because you will have to make sure that the students can still cope. You see, there's a fine balance between trying to load the student to see what mettle he has to be able to survive the course, and another thing to make them actually quit. The objective is not a boot camp or a marine camp in wherever, and the objective is to have 600, and your real objective is to get 100. Or you're in the UP College of Law, I think they begin with 4 classes, they bring it down to 3. Or of course, if you're in San Beda College of Law, you have 14 classes that begin in freshman, and you end up, I think, with only 3 or 4 at the end of the first year. So that what you don't do in the admissions process, you make up for it by trying to see who's going to survive the first year. This is not the kind of course we're preparing. If that were the kind of course, then we can admit 500, load them, and then hope that a lot of them will quit along the way. Okay, there are two reasons for that, why you want the 14 going down to 3. There's a pedagogical or andragogical reason, which is survival of the fittest. There's also a financial reason for that. Cash flow is good. Cash flow is good. You get a high cash flow in first year, parang acceptance fee, then later on you bring it down. Then you're sure that if you made a mistake in the admissions process, yung natitira, yun yung matino. Pangalawa, mataas yung cash flow mo. Kasi 14 klase yung tinanggap mo. So, I'm not saying it's bad. All I'm saying is you've got to understand why that's happening. Alright. Now I go to the last point on preparing the syllabus. And this is the issue of knowledge, skills, and attitude. From the very beginning, when we deploy a course, the first thing we ask ourselves is, what's the knowledge that we want to inculcate? What are the skills that we want to develop? What is the attitude that we want the learner to have? I know that for those of you who've been teaching in higher ed, it sounds corny. But my problem with that is that if you don't go back to this basic thing that you have in preparing a lesson plan, you are not going to be able to deploy a blended learning program. No matter how good a professor you are in the brick and mortar world. Why? Because KSA is the basis of guide questions, it's the basis of the activities, it's going to be the basis of the assessment that you will have. Next slide. Okay, so let's go back to this basic concept. When we talk about knowledge, skills, and attitude, the question we're asking ourselves, what are the key concepts and ideas you want the learners to learn? And as an example, I'll use the example of the course I'm developing right now, which is on social enterprise lawyering. Or what they call in the DAR, PBD lawyering, Program Beneficiaries Development Lawyering. And the basic question we're asking ourselves there is, if you're going to develop a course for lawyers or paralegals or people who graduate from law to be able to service the agrarian reform beneficiary in enterprise development, that's a basic question that we're trying to ask ourselves. We have around 1,200 legal officers in the entire department. I think 200 of them are lawyers. The next 1,000 are people who graduated an LLB but never took the bar, or some took the bar but will never admit that they did. But I'll tell you a little thing about MCQs, because it's got something to do with the way we develop courses. You know when the MCQs in the bar exam were developed? Because when people took the bar before, there's one examiner who would look at 2,000 papers. There's a number of people who took the bar at that time. So they will get the blue book, from UP you get the blue book, and read it and grade it. 2,000, and you had 6 months to do that. Well, by now we have 6,000 people who take the bar exam, and one examiner to read the 6,000 booklets. There's really major problems there. One, if you deploy an essay question to 30 students, by the time you go on the 10th student, you most probably will realize what level of answers you have on your students. You may adjust. But if you check 6,000 papers, if on the 5,555 you realize that you were so harsh on test paper number 1, there's no way you can go back to that. It's very subjective. That's how bad the bar exams are. So what did they do? I said, an examiner can't do that, so let's do multiple choice. So this time around, they're going to do 60% multiple choice and 40% essay. By next year, you have to pass the multiple choice before you get the essay. So yung essay mo ngayon, kung dati 6,000, baka ngayon maging 3,000, manageable na ulit for 6 months. What's the problem with that kind of assessment? You're coming up with an assessment to make life easier for the checker than it is than asking yourselves, what is it that you need to get basic for you to say this person is an ATTY and you can let him loose on the ignorant public to claim that he knows the law. there's no conversation of that sort that's happening in the legal profession. So, if we're talking about social enterprises, what is the knowledge that we would want to be able to get in the course of social enterprise lawyering? So for knowledge, we want to situate social enterprises in the legal framework. That's a knowledge that I think is very essential for people who are going to deal with agrarian reform beneficiaries. We want them to get the history of the social enterprises. Why? Because social enterprises is not something new. It's been something that's been evolving over the years. But in recent years, you had NGOs, we call them civil society, now we're calling social enterprise. And there's really an overlap if you had a Venn diagram between the concepts and definitions that people have. Now, since we're talking about social enterprise, the legal framework, we want to be able to situate what is it, how it evolved to be this way. Why is there a need for social enterprise? That's the knowledge part that we want to get. So if I'm going to deploy a course on PBD lawyering, and our people from Bari are here, and BARBD, which is our bureau in the DAR for beneficiaries development and HR, those are the key concepts that I want to be able to get. That's the knowledge I think that is essential for them to have if they want to know social enterprise. When we talk about skills, simple, you want actions and applications you want the learners to demonstrate. Remember, when you talk about knowledge, you want them to learn it, you want them to know it. The skills is something you want to be able to assess whether or not that person can actually do this at the end of the course. It's a skills. So I want them to be able to identify issues for an organization, and better still, I want them to create an organization. I want them to have a chance at putting up a cooperative. I want them to put together for me an articles of incorporation of a farmers organization that can satisfy the knowledge that based on the knowledge that they have, they can actually do it. I want to be able to assess that. I mean, assuming this were an entire course or an entire curriculum of social enterprise. And another important thing is the attitude. Positions or decisions you want learners to take based on the knowledge derived and possibly the practice that they had with the skills. The attitude is something very important. The attitude I want to be able to bring across to our legal officers in the Department of Agrarian Reform is that people, you don't need an ATTY to be able to help the agrarian reform beneficiary. That to me is a key attitude because our LLBs in the department are suffering from parang tawag doon, second-class citizen thinking kasi hindi siya ATTY eh. So feeling niya, I'm a child of a lesser God because I'm not an ATTY. But what's the attitude I want them to get? The attitude I want them to get is that to be able to help the agrarian reform beneficiary to put up the social enterprise or the community-based enterprise, you don't need an ATTY. Why? Because you're not going to go to court. If you're literate and you can analyze the legal concepts and you can help people determine the issues that they have, you can actually put up a social enterprise. After all, you've studied 4 years of undergrad, another 4 years of law. You've had around 12 units of commercial law, maybe 6 or 10 units of obligations and contracts. You can actually do it. That's the attitude I want. Okay. So, we use the KSA on a degree program, which is the MPM that you have, and also on a per-course basis. Now, not all courses are skills courses. There are some courses that are really just for knowledge, but we want the KSA to be at the back of your mind because when you have the KSA at the back of your mind, it's going to be it's going to be easy to write your syllabi, it's going to be easy to write your guide questions, it's going to be easy to write the activities that you have, it's going to be easy to do what kind of assessment or group activities that you have. If you don't have the KSA at the back of your mind, you got a major problem when you do your syllabus. When you begin to cut the syllabus now into certain days or chunks, or you now have 32 instruction hours, then if this is clear to you, it will be very easy for you to determine what kind of activities you have during a particular day, during a particular time. this is lesson planning abridged in 2-3 hours, okay? So you do it on a per module, you do it on a per course approach. In some modules, it will not, KSA will not be there, it's all K. Sometimes it's all S, sometimes it's all A. Sometimes it's more A's other than S. But you've got to always get this thing going. Okay, so this is the residential program. So those are the things that we need to look at when we do the syllabus for this course, or these courses. So I talked about this already, give suggested timeline for readings, and how to take notes in preparation for class discussion. Okay. We take notes all the time, right? We take notes when I talk here. You take notes, a lot of our students now take notes by way of computers. What is critical is many times, and I have some materials on how to take notes when you read. I have a lot of materials on how to, I have a book on how to read like a lawyer. It's an idiot's guide for people who want to enter the law school. LaSalle, by the way, where I come from, konting advertisement, is the only college of law where we don't assume that your students know how to read. So before they go to law school in the first sem, we have a 2-week course that teaches them how to read a case, how to take down notes, and how to form study groups. We have a different philosophy in LaSalle. Our philosophy is the UP philosophy where I came from, where I spent the best years of my life. It's so good, I spent 6 years in law school. And that was because I was going in and out. I really liked law school, so I decided to stay for 6 years. I really like that for masochism. No, I didn't flunk. I only flunked one subject. I was going on leave all the time. The UP philosophy is, you see, UP is not like other schools. Pag kumuha kami ng 4 na klase, malamang yung 4, mapwera talagang balasubas ka, gagraduate ka. Ang graduate ka, iba 5 years, iba 6, pero lahat yung, kahit paano gagraduate. Yung ibang eskwela, kukuha ng 14, babagsak sa 3, bahala si Batman sa inyo. The UP model is essentially, it's going to be tough, but since the admissions process is so rigorous, you most probably get the best of the lot, except those really die-hard Blues or Ateneans or Lasallians or Thomasians or God knows what else. You cannot imagine that their being is, never mind. Okay na yung lulusot. So, they able to survive. In LaSalle, we're not going to get those types. We're getting people mostly from our school. We're on a trimester basis. We have problems with trimester. Since I'm not part of LaSalle, I can tell you we have, but anyway. So, we teach them how to take down notes. How do you read a case and how do you take down notes? You take down notes in a different way when you listen to somebody talk who is already synthesizing the readings that you had. And that's your professor. Binigyan ka ng readings, binasa mo, pumunta ka doon, siguro kung 100 yung dapat malaman, nung binasa mo, naintindihan mo yung 50. Yung teacher, ang nagbibigay ng 50 kasi pinagtatagni-tagni niya yung iba't ibang readings na binasa mo. I have some materials on how to read to prepare for class. We can possibly reproduce it for our students. Because we need them to take down notes. Don't you realize many times when you're in higher ed, binasa mo yung isang reading mo, medyo hindi mo naintindihan nung pinagduktong-duktong nung teacher mo at nung nagkaroon kayo ng recitation sa klase, dun lumiliwanag. Ang problema, pag pumasok sa klase, na inaasahan niya na maintindihan niya yung pinagduktong ng teacher na hindi niya binasa yung assigned reading. Perhaps you can, if you can have some readings on how to take down notes. That might be good. There are ways to take down notes for a meeting. There are ways to take down notes in preparation for class. There are ways to take down notes when you're listening to a teacher. Each kind has a different skill set on how to take down notes. I'll lend you the materials that I have. So we have 8 hours in a day, 48 hours in a week. If we cut up the residential program, we can actually do 2 per week, 24 plus 24, 4 plus 4 hours per day. So, ibig sabihin, kung dalawang subject, isa sa umaga, isa sa hapon. Ang problema doon sa 4 hours, ang hirap magturo ng 4 hours, isang problema. Pangalawa, yung prep time for 4 hours ang hirap. In the law school, nung una ako nagtuturo ng aking unang subject, I would take around 2 hours for every 1 hour of class that I teach. Because it was the first time I was developing the thing that while I was teaching. The second year, I would still do 1 hour for every hour of class that I taught. But then again, I'm not a Professor Balane or Labitag, one of these old fogies that you see shuffling around in the law school, who's been teaching for the past 40 years. Siguro sila, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, they can do that. Otherwise, because I'm not saying that our professors are bad. All I'm saying is because it's a new way that they're going to be teaching. They may know the subject matter so well, but they will still need time to prepare. You can have a combination of 4 per week, so 12, 12, 12, 2 hours per day. You do 4 subjects within the day. You can play around with this when you do the actual design on your week. What do you do? Combination depends on the activities of the courses, the prep time. So you might have a need to have a longer first period in the residency, the first residency program, or possibly give more time between the start and the time you send the materials. Or you may want to do a video lecture on how to take down notes and how to prepare as you send the materials. In the department right now, all our lectures are done with video. Barry is doing a video, so we had a training for all the lawyers, all 200 plus lawyers in the department. We've reduced them into video. Barry, our Bureau of Reform and Education, is sending them out of the field right now. The LLB grads are looking at them. There are guide questions. The PowerPoint is there. What do we do during the residency period? Think of it this way. If you had 2 hours per subject during the residency, you'd have 2 in the morning, 4 subjects in 1 day. And that will go on for 2 weeks. 8 to 12, 1 to 5. 4 plus 4. O pwede ka maglagay ng mga break. Kasi since nakatira naman sila sa isang lugar, pwede mo lagyan na 1 hour break para imbes na tulugan ka sa klase, tulugan na lang, matulugin mo na lang sa kwarto. So we want to be able to have very interactive lectures. And like I said, interactive lecture is going to be a function of the amount of preparation the students have. And it goes without saying the amount of preparation that the teachers will have. I will assume that the teachers will prepare. But I would like to emphasize the preparation time that we give for the students. The other thing we do in the residential period is, the idea is when you go on the online, we're going to have groups. It's like case groups. Or when you go to the masters, to the MBM programs, you have CAN groups. Case analysis groups, or who can come up with your WACs or the written analysis of cases. These are groups that work together. You also have this in a lot of other non-MBA courses where you have group work. Now, the group work is going to be done in the online, but you want to be able to give them a chance already to do it while they're face-to-face in the 2-week period. The idea is, it's very hard to work with somebody whose face and quirks you don't know because you never had any actual interaction with them. So what is built into your design? Built into your design during the residency period is already group work within that particular class. Now, it need not be graded. It can be many exercises that the teachers have. So you build it in. You want to do that for the online period. You can have actual group activities, like you can have case discussions, you can have written, you can have oral. You can have them develop a paper in overnight. I remember I used to have an office right beside my office was right beside AIM, and I will know when the AIM students, kailan ba deadline? Weekend ba nila ginagawa yan? You see these zombies coming out of AIM, trying to put together the CAN groups. At that time, Greenbelt was still a Greenbelt. Because they had parking lot, etc. And you see all these you see all these AIM, MBA students, first 3 months, first 6 months yung nasa kwarto kayo. Ilang buwan yun? 3 buwan. 3 buwan sila nakatago dun sa dorm sa AIM. Makikita mo yung mga yan pagka na para mga zombie naglalakad, kakain, tapos babalik, gagawin yung grupo. You can do that because in the residency period, you're going to put them together. So the idea is you want the groups to interact already while in the residency period. So how do you choose topics during the residency period? If you have a brick and mortar life, you will have the flexibility during the entire trimester to pull the levers, as it were, of what kind of interaction you're going to have. Again, not so in the blended program. So how do you choose the topics? Well, you want the topics where clarification will most probably be needed. You want to go back to basic concepts that you have in the residency period. Because the other objective that you have during the residency period is you want to get to know your students. The Beadles, the teaching assistants, the professors will have a hard time appreciating the flavor of the discussion in the discussion board in your learning management system if I don't know how you look like. But the idea is when I see your face in the discussion board, I should be able to picture the way you would talk to me if we were face to face. Because we had that interaction when we were face to face. I will see that picture in the discussion board. Maybe a little bit smiling, a little bit less lipstick. But then that's it. I want to remember that smile when she's in the discussion board. Because that is what will bring about the humanity in the interaction in the discussion board. You want that interaction to happen during the residency period. So, in the residency period, if it's for 2 weeks, depending on how you break it, the interaction is not going to happen only in class, which is what I'm doing here right now. I'm talking because I need to finish this in a few hours. But even during the breaks. Even during the breaks. So the online activities, what we're going to do is we're going to have video lectures. There are 2 ways to do this. In some online courses, they have text. Meaning, they get the text, they post it on the web. That's one way. The other way is there are assigned readings and you have a book that is specially made by the professor to synthesize the readings that were given. So you read it, you read the readings, the assigned readings, and then you read the lecture of the teacher. That's the second way. So the first way is you read everything on the computer itself. It's attached to the learning management system. The second way is you are given your readings and you do the readings in it's a book that you can bring around as you ride the jeep or you ride your car or God knows what else. The third method is that you deploy the video online. So you can go online and then you listen to the teacher lecturing. What we're going to be adapting is essentially the video, prepared video after the readings. It really depends on the teacher. Some will still want perhaps written. But I think for the most part, we're going to use the video. So what's the video all about? Well, the video is essentially, well, of course, it's based on the readings that you assign for that particular period. Now, think of the online this way. You've done with 24 hours in the residency period. You have 8 hours spread over 4 months. Depending, if you have 8 hours spread over 4 months, you can do it 8 weeks, tapos ng 2 months, or you can do it every other week, spread over 4 months. The lecture is supposed to be equivalent to an instruction hour. It can be anywhere from 45 minutes to 1 hour. What are you supposed to do in that lecture? Well, what you're supposed to do in that lecture is you're supposed to synthesize the readings that you assign. You're not supposed to read the readings again aloud. Because there are some professors who do that. They get the readings and they read it aloud. Like I had one teacher in the law school whose assessment tool was to write all the digest of your cases in longhand. And you gave it in a logbook. And when we asked him eventually, so why do you do that? Well, he said, at the very least, I'm sure that because it's written in your own handwriting, you must have read the case. Or at least you must have read the digest. And he did that until he retired. We had another professor who actually gave his own book, gave it to us and said, I want you to write and copy my book. At the end of the semester, I will get my book. So one guy decided to put an Our Father right in the middle of the entire record book. And guess what? The teacher saw the Our Father and said, I'm going to flunk you. You better do this again. What was his point? His point was, I want you to read the readings that I assigned. I'm not saying you're doing that, but what my point is, when we do the video lectures, we're not there to repeat what the book said. We're there to help the student put together the concepts as you find it in the different readings. Now, as an example, you can have different theories of social enterprise law. As a matter of information, the social enterprise concept that you find in Europe is very different than the social enterprise concept that you find in the US. And the social enterprise concept that we find in the Philippines is something that we're still trying to define while we are so busy putting up all the Center for Social Enterprise, not knowing fully well exactly what we're talking about, at least in the legal framework. So you're supposed to synthesize that for the students in the lecture that you have. But try to see how it happens in the brick and mortar world. In the brick and mortar world, if you assign some readings and you go to class like what we do now, there are two ways you can do it. I can talk this way and try to show you how great I am at trying to synthesize the different concepts. But more often than not, what the teacher in higher education will do will most probably to try and interact with the students, to try and get them to synthesize it themselves in response to the real-life questions that you pose, or in the law school by way of the Socratic method, in trying to get them to get the thesis, antithesis, to come up with a synthesis of the different doctrines that you find in the jurisprudence that we have. What's my point? In the brick and mortar school, the synthesis occurs in the interaction that you have with the student in real time. In real time. When you go in the residency period, that can be done. When you go to the online period, or the online component of the blended learning program, you are not going to have that luxury. You are not going to have that luxury. You cannot ask this person whether concept A and concept B, and what's the difference between the two, and hope that you can get an instantaneous answer. You won't. You won't. So what do you do in the video lecture? In the video lecture, you actually do that already. You actually do that already for your students. But the question you ask yourself, isn't that spoon feeding? Doesn't that violate all these theories about constructivist theories of education, that when you get here and online, it's supposed to be even more hewing closer to constructivism in education than anything else? Okay. How do you tweak that? How do you tweak that? The way you tweak it is that you don't give everything, because you allow in the discussion board, the time for the students to talk with each other. And how are you going to get them to talk to each other? You will do several things. One is, before they even read the material, you already give them the guide questions on what is it that you want to get in the minimum. Two, we put together the concepts that you have in the video lecture that you have. And what kind of questions do you have? Well, you can have several ways. You can have measures of comprehension of concepts from readings and synthesize in the video lecture. How do you measure comprehension of what came out in the video and what came out in the readings? Well, one way that a lot of professors do it is by simply giving situations and asking which concept would apply. And that's done in the discussion board. Now, again, what's unique about the discussion board is this. In the brick and mortar school, when I post a question to her, everyone hears it, right? When she answers immediately, everyone hears it, and when she answers, I can ask him what he thinks to be able to build up on the concept that she just posted. And so forth and so on in the brick and mortar world. However, when you're doing online, what she posts, if she posts at 2 a.m., no one may be looking at what she posted. You're going to post now at, let's say, 6 a.m. when you wake up because she's a morning person. She's a day person. She wakes up at 6, opens the discussion board in the learning management system. She's what she posted in reaction to the application of concept. Then she realizes that what I was going to say, she said. That's a problem. That's a problem. In the brick and mortar world, you don't have such problem, because what she said, you can modify a little bit, and then you can raise your teacher. So that is one big difference between the brick and mortar and the online world. But what is the good side about it? The good side about it is because, remember, before she posted my guide question, she most probably thought about it before she actually did it. God forbid if she does not. What she'll most probably do is she'll look at the guide questions, type it on her MS Word, refine it, think about it, then cut it, and then paste it in the discussion board. So that by the time her thought goes in the discussion board, a lot of thought process went into that. It isn't like what you have when you're sitting down here and I ask you, what do you think of Noy Noy's speech in Fordham? You'll sit down, you'll stand up and say what you want. This one is more thought of. No. So when she comes in now, the only option left for her is she either disagrees or agrees, or she wants to modify it. But when she reads her post on the discussion board, again, she won't blurt out and write what she thinks of her posting in a matter of 10 minutes. She'll do it in most likely 15 minutes. It's a one paragraph thing, but it's probably more deliberate. So there's a technique in asking those questions in the video, in the discussion board, and you have to be very clear what is it that you want to do. Remember what I said earlier about synthesizing in the online? You synthesize but not everything. Why? Because you want to get from the interaction of people. Remember, you have 1 week to post in the discussion board. Think of it this way. If you had a Tuesday to Tuesday cutoff. If a Tuesday to Tuesday cutoff, two things could have happened. The guide question was already in the syllabus, or it gets posted on the discussion board. Let's assume it's in the syllabus. By the time they read the readings, they already know what they're going to answer to those guide questions. If you just post it on the discussion board on Tuesday morning, let's say your cutoff is 12 midnight, so the bidder or the teaching assistant goes there, posts the discussion question on Tuesday 12:01. The students open at 12:02. They see the guide questions. In the online world, marami ring katulad nung gusto magsalita. Ang gagawin, pagbukas ng 12 o'clock, 12:01, nandun agad sa discussion board. Gusto niya, siya yung unang-unang maglalagay. Kasi sa online, lugi ka pag ikaw yung dulo. Kasi by the time you post, lahat ng pwede mo sabihin, nasabi na. So there's always a merit in posting it. Now, you can ask them to choose between contending theories. You can ask them to apply the concept that you are teaching or that you are discussing to real life based on their own particular experience in their work. And that is what makes online learning very nice, because while they're learning, they're working, you can actually make them apply it in their kind of work. You can have reactions to contending views. You can have several styles. You can post all the guide questions on day one, or you can look at the quality of the discussions that you're having in the discussion board and post another question and ask your bidder to email it to everyone. Or ask your bidder to text everyone and say, I just posted another discussion question because you realize as a teacher that the discussion question that you have was not drawing out the kind of reactions that you're getting from the online class. So you post another, may karoon ka rin flexibility. You can post another question, ask the bidder, text mo lahat. Text lahat, blast text. May blast text ni Nagia. May bagong question sa discussion board. Look at it. As a teacher, you can synthesize what's happening there and then put up a question. This is the reason why they say that when you use online learning, you actually drive a lot more discussion than what you would have in the brick and mortar world. Why? Because you cannot keep quiet. Because more often than not, part of your grade is based on the quality of the posting that you have on the discussion board. In an ordinary brick and mortar world, you're teaching. All teachers in a brick and mortar world will say a percentage of your grade is going to be based on class discussion. For those of you who have been teaching for the longest time, unless you're in the law school where we keep our little class cards to terrorize our students and we shuffle them, and we really grin and really enjoy it while we shuffle this thing. Malas mo ikaw na naman. In the law school, we really keep track. But sometimes, even in the MBA class, there are some students who are actually going to get away with reciting once or twice or thrice during the entire trimester. And even if the students tell you that class discussion is part of the grade, more often than not, at the end of the semester, the teacher may not have real good basis to give a grade on your class participation because he was not able to, I don't talk to you and then what's your name and then I give a 5 during a normal class. In the law school, that's part of the game. You have a little class card, index card, and I put grade. But in the MBA class, I don't really sit down as you recite and give you a grade right there. The most I do in my MBA class in business law is that when I leave the class, I go to the library and I try to look at my Facebook. I have a folder like this with the pictures of all my students, and I put the grade or my impressions. But at the end of the semester, I'm still not comfortable using the grade I gave on the class discussion, enough for them to give them 20 or 30% on the class discussion in a brick and mortar world. However, in an online world where you have a learning management system which is nicely developed by the DILC, as a teacher, I can actually go back to your discussion board and find out, summarize and trying to be profound. Siyempre, ibang nagpo-post, mahilig din, kukuha ng konting quotation dito, konting quotation doon, sabi ni Professor ganyan, ni Professor ganon. Pag binasa mo yung sinasabi niya, ala siyang sinasabi, wala siyang dinadagdag doon sa paghalaw ng mga iba't ibang teorya, sa pag-apply ng concept. Wala, ang ginawa lang niya, ano lang siya, parang bibliographer. Pinagkukuha yung mga topic doon, tapos binabalik-balik lang sa'yo. Sa brick and mortar world, pag ginagawa ka ng gano'n, baka ma-impress ka kasi mabilis mo makalimutan. Our memories fly away so fast after the class. Wala na, pagdating mo ng bayat, nag-iihi na yung anak mo. Papalit ka na ng diaper, nakalimutan mo na yan. But in the online world, where you have a learning management system, you can go back to the discussion board and see whether these guys are actually making sense. And you have a better grade to give for class discussion than you will ever have in the brick and mortar world unless you are in the law school, where a big part is one of the skills that we want to develop in the law school is the way you speak and the way you use your nice booming voice to be able to convince some judge who will, as you will realize when you get to law to practice, the judges don't really want to listen to you because they say, submit and reduce it to writing in your memorandum book. Nangyayari lang pala yung nagsasalitang abogado sa law and order. Kasi sa Pilipinas, ala tayong jury. See, that's how crazy our culture is. We thought that lawyers needed to speak well. They don't. A lot of the best paid lawyers are people who don't speak well, but they write well. And yet, in the law school, we're taught to think on our feet and be able to speak nicely and be able to synthesize our thoughts in a minute or so that the teacher will be impressed. But like I said, in the online world, when you have the learning management system, that is why they say that if you are able to drive the interaction well in the online world, it is even better than a brick and mortar school in terms of interaction between students. And that is why the discussion boards become very, very important for us. That is why the guide questions become very important for us. You're very clear what is it that you want to get out of your guide questions. The nice thing about blended programs is that
There's a lot of work that comes in before you begin. But the moment, if you do it well, the moment it rolls, when you do the second or third deployment, it's going to be very easy. It's going to be very easy. And the replication is going to be faster. In the Department of, again, Reform, we're doing that already with our lectures. Like we're coming up with, Barry is experimenting now, we're coming up with a lot of administrative orders in the department. These are long administrative orders that changes the processes in the department. And we're using this method that we're doing now to be able to reach our employees who are all over the country. We have 12,000 employees all over the country. And it's impossible to be able to cascade the administrative orders by just sending out the administrative orders, which is what we used to do. So kaya, ang gagawin namin, we'll get a speaker and move them all over the country. You know, after doing this lecture for 3-4 times na paulit-ulit, mababato ka na. So ito, matagal ang preparation, pero oras na dineploy mo, ang bilis mong gamitin. Like in the program that I went through, which used the blended learning program, they change their lectures, I think, once every 3 years lang. So that means they can have 6 deployments in 3 years using the same video, using the same syllabus. So let's go to the online period. Because the residency period, sanay tayo yung gawin yun, yung face-to-face, brick and mortar. When you do the online, there are several activities that you can have here. One activity used by this course on leadership and management is our discussion board integrators per week. What do they do? So remember the example earlier about discussion boards. What they do here is that you can have group work, so you can have groups of 4 or 5. And what they do is, if you're doing a Tuesday to Tuesday week, you can have a situation where on a Sunday, or that by the end of Sunday, one group who are all in different places can actually do the synthesis of what came out for the week. They synthesize what happens. This can be done by group work. This can be done individually. You can have knowledge integrators for the week, and they can be assigned to put together what are the different points. So you don't just cut and paste what comes out in the discussion board. You try to synthesize the whole thing for the week. So that the class, at the end of the week, before they close, they open a new one on Tuesday, they can synthesize what happened in the discussion board, all the different points. It's also a tool for the teacher or the teaching assistant to be able to look and find out, am I getting where I want to go to? Am I getting to where I want to go to? So you can have knowledge integrators. Now, you can assign one team. So if you have a class of, let's say, 30 to 40 or 30 people, you have 6 teams, and you have 8 weeks, you can have one team integrating per week, and they already know who's going to be the integrator for that particular week. The group, they can do that remotely. One teacher, we had a class in negotiation, and for those of you who've done programs on negotiation classes, you can also do negotiations online. And how do negotiations online operate? You would normally have set A of facts and set B of facts. And then before you even start the negotiation online, one exercise that the teacher did was the group meets online, virtual, and they come out, what are the negotiating points that we have? What would be our BATNAs for those of you who are into this, what's a BATNA nga? Best altern to a BATNA, whatever. So you come up with a BATNA before you start the negotiation. That can be collaborative online. Or if it's a case that you want to do, you can structure the discussion of the case such that you get the facts first, you get the issues, you get the areas of consideration, depending on the written analysis of cases, which can also be done online. So you can also have case discussions. The other exercise that people have is individual or group answers to predetermined questions. These are based on the readings and the video. Ito naman, ang ginawa niya, sa bawat session, meron na siyang questions na nakalagay. And the group comes up with a group report. During the week, may deadline din yun. And all the groups will submit. So pwede rin You see, you drive discussion several ways. You can do it through the discussion board, and you can have mini discussions among the groups. What does that do? What that does is that you try to make sure, remember my comment earlier, that between the brick and mortar world and the online world, you can actually have more discussion online than you would have in the brick and mortar. This is another way. You can have one discussion in the discussion board for the whole class, and you can have mini discussions on a per group because they have to submit at the end of the week. And later on, I'll show you how the group charters work out, how the schedules work out. So you can have these questions for discussion, which they already discussed. Or you can have weekly problem sets. The weekly problem sets talks about comprehension analysis. This one is a course in economics. You have the topic, you have the assignment, you have the readings, you have the question of the week, and then you have a problem set. And the problem set that I chose, this one is not quantitative. But in the other parts of this class, which is an international economics class, you actually can do quantitative computations. And this one, we collaborated coming up with the answer to this online. Because the group meets once a week. I'll show you how that thing works later. So you have the readings, and then this is graded by the teacher. So every week, that the group meets for that particular class to answer a problem set. If it's a management class, you can have a case that the people have to post an answer for. And somewhere towards the middle of the discussion for that particular week, for example, a Tuesday to Tuesday operation, you say you must post it, say, by Thursday. When you do open the Friday discussion, you're already talking about that particular case. So you'll have two levels of discussion. You'll have a discussion of the group itself, and you can have a discussion of the whole class discussing that particular topic in relation to the readings. How do you prepare online lecture materials? Well, the first thing you have to do is to relax. Some people can't talk without an audience. It's kind of hard that if this were one room and all you had was a camera and there was no audience. Mahirap yun. So some people, like in my case, I prefer to have an audience. Or if you don't have an audience, yung ikaw lang, the first key is for you to relax because the replay will show all the defects. So don't worry about take twos. But the second thing about professors, you have to tell them, don't worry so much. Because you see, a lot of professors never really realize that they have weird mannerisms. Like I sometimes scratch my hair, I put my hand at the back. Until you put a video, you never realize that they actually do that. Now, for a lot of professors, this is the first time they're actually going to see themselves in video on how they conduct class. Like, I'm sure that after I release, I'm going to be shocked that kaya pala ako nakakalbo kasi kamot ako ng ulo. So, relax. Okay, use of graphics and timing. Now, this is something for the tech people to do. How do you synchronize the video of the person talking and the PowerPoint? It's a technical issue. There are many techniques to do this. In the DAR, the thing we did in the MCLE was a simple program. We just put it in. You don't need to have very complex software to be able to do that. But how do you get the use of graphics? Now, we had one teacher who was teaching economics and they had a lot of graphs. So what he did was he had graphs that actually move. So you can use Flash, but you have to time the way he talks to the time that they put it. Now, in a brick and mortar world, I remember when Professor Monsod was teaching us in the discussion class, in the lecture classes in economics, we had the Econ auditorium, and we had Monsod talking to 200 students. And at that time, there was no PowerPoint. She used chalk. And she was able to use chalk, iba't ibang kulay. By the time we're done, you had a multicolored graph of M1 plus M2, or the money supply in Econ, and then you would have a discussion class on Fridays in smaller groups. Now, you do that online. With technology now, it's going to be easy. Professor Monsod will not have to write those chalk marks on the graph so well. She's very good in writing graphs. It made us understand very well. But it was funny because when she went to class, that blackboard was blank. By the time she was done, the thing was full of graphs, and we understood, well, 60% of it. The other 40%, we tried to understand with the teacher, but she was that good.
And that's why all Econ students who go through UP Diliman at one point in time would have Monsod in Econ 11, 101, and 102. So graphics. We try to do a maximum of 1 hour. Why 1 hour? Because we don't want to make it longer. We're doing 1 instruction hour. Remember, the 1 instruction hour here is going to be very long, because if you look at the 1 instruction hour in a brick and mortar world, the teacher, if there's a lot of interaction, is really talking for around 1/3 or 2/3 of the time. In the law school, it can go down to 20% of the time. And the students are the ones talking most of the time. So 1 hour is really very long. So what do you do in the online lecture? It's used to summarize and synthesize. It's supposed to connect the dots. The readings assigned, not to repeat them, but not to spoon feed. There's a fine balance between giving them everything, because if you give them everything, they will realize that, the students will realize, and they won't bother to read. Because they're going to say, anyway, you give it in the lecture, why do I have to read? The idea is to be able to deliver the lecture in such a way that they will not understand the lecture if they don't read. Why do you want them to read? Because it is only in reading and them processing it in their thoughts by themselves that they get insights that are unique. Because when students just listen to what I'm going to tell you because I'm the teacher and I happen to be the one in the platform, they'll take that as gospel truth. When in reality, when you read, when you get a reading yourself, then all the thoughts come into your mind. That's why the good novel, like a Ludlum or a Clancy, or if you're more into the classics, are the novels that will make you read and make your mind wander and try to visualize and picture exactly what the author is trying to tell you in the work of fiction. In the work which is not fiction but non-fiction, but is trying to put across a concept, the best written book is that which lets the reader wander and try to see how it applies to his work. The concept, the abstract concept, getting it applied in his work and in his daily life. That is where the learning really happens. Not in trying to be able to give it back to you, but how to apply it. So that's the beauty of the lecture properly done. So be conscious of what you want to raise in discussion board during the lecture. Huwag mong bigay lahat. Because otherwise, wala ka nang tatalakayin. So discussion board questions or group work are flexible yet predetermined. It's an opportunity to derive opinion and apply concepts, not the time to synthesize the readings. That's your job. Your job, that's in your job in the lecture. The synthesis of the readings does not happen in the discussion board. It's normally what we try to do is to get the concept applied into their daily life or to what you want them to drive to in the KSA in the discussion board. Or you may ask them to synthesize concepts, then apply the concept if you just want to make sure that they're getting the right concept in the discussion board. Okay. Groups. I keep on talking about groups. What are these groups for? These groups are really, there are many ways to put together the groups. What is the basis for grouping? Well, the grouping, we look at the KSA across the bundle of courses. Why are we looking at the knowledge, skills, and attitude across the number of courses? Because you want a mix of people inside that group. In some situations, you may want to put together those who come from the same department, or those who come from the same function. But more often than not, you don't. But you need to be able to get what are the characteristics by which you will have the basis to put together the different groups. You can look at the geographical distribution and the technology. What makes the technology work? I mean, what are the issues that you have in technology? Places with poor phone lines, poor internet. How are they going to collaborate? How are you going to put them together? You can have 4 to 5, and the groups stay on for the entire semester. You don't have a different group per class, per course. The idea is you want that group to stay together because you're trying to fulfill two things in the group. It's a place for discussion, but it's also a place for peer support. So the idea is you want the group to stay together during the entire semester so that people who have major issues during the semester, they can help each other. They can help each other if they have major crises in their life. If something goes wrong in their family, their love life, or their work, etc., that group is supposed to drag them back. The group is supposed to be the shepherd that brings back the sheep that go astray. That's why you need these groups. Now, the groups are formed during the residency period. Why do you want to do that? Because you want the group to come up with a group charter. What's a group charter? The group charter is the rules or the rules by how the group will come together. Okay. So these are team charters. So during the residency, these are the guide questions that the group comes up with. So what are your individual objectives and motivations? It's really getting to know you. What's the group all about? How do we brand our team? Some groups come up with names. So that they, for that group, they will have a name. That in the Philippines, the group that the institution that comes up with names all the time is the PMA. They have Matikas, Matatag, Madis, etc. They go to UP Village and they try to get all the adjectives there. And those are the PMA names. Matikas, Malakas, Magiting, etc. Meron namang class na malumanay. Should we appoint a leader? Should we rotate that role? How are you going to check the leader? Are you going to have one leader for the group? Or are you going to have one leader on a per-course basis? Parang a lead person for that particular group. How should you handle absences, time away from the group? Because some people are going to have extra things to do when remember, they'll be working during the time. How do you account for that? How much should you use a team news group and how much individual emailing? There are news groups that you can put up in your LMS, which is internal to your group. Individual emailing. How much do we do individual emailing, Google groups, collaboration within the LMS? Pagka may na-in-love, pwede ba natin gamitin yung email group para mag-email, nagligawan kayo doon? Ewan ko, ano bang average age ng mga estudyante natin? Will we do weekly chats? More often than not, they will put up weekly chats because they have group work. They have to chat. How do they chat? Do they chat by cell phone? Conference call? They do Skype? They can do Google Chat? They can do Google Voice din, di ba? They can do Google Voice. That can be something that we can teach during the residency period. Will we use faxes or the telephone? These are irritants that if you don't settle in the beginning, is going to be a major problem. In our day and age, for the people who are above 40, it's almost natural for us to say, I was in a dead spot. Although we realize that in Metro Manila, there are really hardly any dead spots. The young kids that we have will never use a dead spot because they know damn well there are no dead spots, hardly any dead spots. Well, cultural differences in our discussion, you might have this issue, although here we're all Filipinos, you might have an issue between Christmas and Ramadan, between the different cultures. Those are things that you have to look at. How do we ensure you meet all the deadlines? What do you do if someone does not complete his or her task? That's very common. In the brick and mortar world, you never get to know this. In my business class before in UP, when I was an undergrad, we had one classmate whose only job, every time we had a case discussion, was to bring the car, bring the pizza, and type the case. But he never participated in any discussion. Nothing substantial at all to the case analysis. At the end of the semester, we were asking ourselves, hey, our case discussion, our case analysis are so good. This guy, all he does is bring the car, bring the pizza, and he had a nice house in La Vista. Are we actually going to give this guy some credit? The teacher will never know. Because what the teacher sees is the finished product. But these are things you have to discuss. Are we going to give a credit for the pizza guy? During my time in BA, prior to 1983, may typing pa kami. So itong trabaho ng tanto, pizza, kotse, bahay, at saka typing. Nothing substantial. What do? We give you something or do you report the teacher? How do you handle that? How do you handle that in class? In the online world, some students will do nothing but synthesize, but never contribute to anything. They will not do research. What's our pros for giving feedback? What in our personal, professional lives might affect our teamwork? You try to forecast within the term. And you tell me, well, my wife is about to give birth or I'm about to give birth. I'm going to have issues like this. And so your team knows. How do we cover up for you in your work during that period? So this is the guide. These are the guide questions for the group that you do during the residency period. And based on those questions, they came up with a team charter. And this is the team charter that they developed while they were in the residency period. So they had their objective. So they had a course facilitating officer. They had we had 3 or 4 courses during the term. So daw ikaw, kung magaling ka sa econ, ikaw magaling ka sa management, ikaw magaling ka sa finance, ikaw yung lead discussant pagdating ng course na yun. You had a course editing officer. Some people, this is not standard. They develop this themselves. Each group will come with its own. You're coming out with a lot of group reports. Maybe you'll have the guy who graduated an AB English or BS English Literature to do this, or Masscom or Jorn to do the course editing so that you can edit the final version. Now, a lot of the group work assignments have limited number of words in a limited number of pages. When you have collaborative work and you have 5 or people in your group, they're all going to come out with a long things, 2-3 pages. At 5, you're 15. Your target is to do only 5 pages with the X number of words. How do you do that? Somebody's got to be able to pull that down, and you're doing it all in a week. So if you notice, in the online world, there's a lot of collaboration that's going to happen in the group for 2 reasons. These are mini discussions, and number 2, these are the shepherds for people who are going to disappear. Without the group work, people will disappear. Deputy officer, supporting team members, decision making, scheduling, they will agree, or here they say, we will meet every 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This uses the US time zone. So wherever they are in the world, Eastern Standard Time, that's where they go. So in my case, when I was going through this course, mine was Tuesday, 9 p.m. So whatever I was doing Tuesday, 9 p.m., I was either in my office or in my house. I was online. I was on Skype. We would chat, we would Skype, or we would talk. Since you were all in the US at the time, you all bought Magic Jack. And we could talk by Magic Jack. We had one classmate who was in Darfur in Sudan, and he could not do it, so he would travel 100 kilometers every week just to be able to get to us on chat. I don't think we'll have a problem here. So postings, new ideas, conflict resolution. Now this is their schedule for the online period. They make a schedule for the next 4 months. They do this while they're in residency. But remember, this thing is not done by them. This is developed by the course designers. Pipilapan nyo na lang to. So here they put the basis for the grades in the different subjects that they have. So they're able to plot it out with the entire group. Now what happens if there's somebody in the group who doesn't do their work? There's a mechanism for you to be able to tell the teacher. We had some situations during our time when a student was practically kicked out by the group because he wasn't doing anything and he got dropped from the course. The group made a decision, the teacher dropped him. Remember, I said the group has 2 functions. It's a shepherd and it's a group, it's a place for discussion. But you also have a beadle and a teaching assistant. I just put a discussion in both because you can actually have 2 or you can actually have 1. A beadle is what? Well, people who go through Ateneo or went to the seminary all know what a beadle is. Kaming mga taga-UP, wala mo kaming beadle kasi hindi naman uso yung taga-bura ng classroom sa amin at saka check ng attendance. Yung teacher namin, hindi rin chinecheck yung attendance. Sa Lasal, chinecheck yung attendance ng teacher. So in the traditional, it's an attendance checker, board eraser, taga-pagsama-sama ng readings, taga-distribute ng reading. Pagka grade 1 ka, taga-sumbong ng maingay. Yan ang beadle, di ba? Yung kinaasaran ng lahat ng estudyante sa grade 2. Yun ang beadle, parang assistant ng teacher. Teacher sip-sep sa teacher higop. Okay? Sa online world, may ganun din. Bakit? Kasi, yung mga profesor natin, una, hindi sila sanay magturo ng ganitong pamamaraan. So, kailangan nyo silang gabayan. Pangalawa, marami tayong teacher na dekampana. Hindi dekampanilya, kampana. So, sa makatuwid, marami silang consulting job, marami silang tinuturuang iba. Yung iba dito, pinilipit lang yung kamay para magturo dito. So, medyo hindi sila sanay. Pangalawa, doubtful sila sa proseso. The idea for the teaching and the assistant and the BDL is to make life easy for the teacher. You see, the philosophy we have in the blended learning program is that the teacher, it should be easy for the teacher to teach online. We are not making the teacher work extra hard for this. That's why we put up teaching assistants. And sila yung tagahila, sila yung iyakan. So sila yung tagatawag na kumbaga hindi ma-handle ng grupo, may nawawala. Sila yung tatawag at ano ba nangyayari sa'yo? May problema ka ba? Para sila yung ate, pero hindi yun yung teacher. Okay? Now, it really depends. I'm not saying that's your job. What I'm saying is it can develop into something like that. Some people are... Pwede rin siya maging pag-summary ng discussion for the lead professor. He need not be a subject matter expert. As long as that person is literate and fairly intelligent, pwede nang isummarize yun. Lalo na kung hindi naman science yung tinuturo mo o kung hindi naman esoteric economics, pwede na. And then, pagka hindi maayos yung grupo, manages issues between the group. So, itong napakahalaga eh. Bakit? Kasi nga yung professor mo, malamang hindi papasok sa learning management system araw-araw. Ito ang kausap ng professor. So, tulad nung huli, kinuwento ko, meron kami isang professor dati. By the way, in my past life, my job was deploying e-learning courses and making money out of it. But now that I'm in government, I'm giving a lecture for free. How do you like? So, the BDL teaching assistant need not be an expert in it. Pero mahalagang alam niya, siguro magbabasa, marunong siya magbasa, he or she is intelligent enough to summarize it. Of course, it's always better if the teaching assistant is somebody who's also on the way to becoming an expert in that particular topic. Kasi maganda yung ganyang interaction doon. Okay, assessment. Okay, this is a question always that people ask. Between the brick and mortar and the blended learning program, how do you really assess how people are learning? The difference between a diploma program, a degree program, and a non-degree program is that in the non-degree program, what you have is simply a certificate of participation. And for purposes of the civil service, when you have a certificate of participation, ano yun? Number of training hours. O yun, pwede na yun, di ba? Okay na yun. But when we come out with the degree program sets minimums on what knowledge, skills, or attitude that the student must have by the time they finish that particular course. And that is what makes all the difference. Assessment becomes very, very important. When we come out with ordinary training courses, seminars, workshops, the fact that you stay here and you have no choice and you are ashamed to fall asleep while I talk here, that's enough. Parang yung MCLE ng mga abogado, yung kabalbalang pinagdaraanan namin every 3 years. Lahat kami tatayo, makikinig sa isang justice, sa isang abogado, sa 200 kami. Yung iba natutulog, yung iba nagko-computer, yung iba nagta-type. Yung IBP may tao dun sa dulo para siguradong walang tatakas. At pagkatapos meron ka ng certificate na compliance sa MCLE. Why are we doing that? Because, well, to be honest about it, we haven't found a way to make sure that lawyers learn new things all the time. Because, when lawyers graduate from the law school, they think that they know everything. That's a professional hazard. When you have 5 lawyers, you have 20 opinions. So, how do we assess the students? Well, you can have essay exams, just like what you have in the brick and mortar world. You can have individual papers. You can have objective, modified multiple choices. But the question is, how do you really assess not only the posts, but the exams, the papers, and one feature that we had essentially came up with three standards. One is accuracy of reflecting what was assigned or discussed. You want to get that knowledge thing going. When you're doing analytical rigor, creativity in applying the concept, you're really working on knowledge and trying to see the skill in applying the particular knowledge that that person gained from your course. And of course, the third one is you want people with clarity. So on the first two, you would have your KSA. Of course, you just want to measure attitudes, and if you're really lazy, some professors, to make sure that people are able to make up, will ask you to do a reaction paper. There's really nothing right or wrong in the reaction paper except trying to see, based on what you're reacting to, are you able to communicate the way your attitude that was formed based on what you saw? So sometimes when the student fails, you try to come up with more reaction papers or more papers, etc. But again, the bottom line in all these goes back to your KSA. What's your knowledge, skills, or attitude that you want to assess? Okay, let's do the grading. IBEL is international business. So some would have, look at you have 30 for midterm, 30 for finals, you have 20 for group projects, a large amount for group. And you have 20 for individual online participation. In most brick and mortar, we're lucky to have 5 to 10% here. Why? Because like I said, you tend to forget. When you do a very large percentage for your class participation, many times as a teacher, you realize at the end of the semester, that's the most subjective of the standards that you have. Why? Because you're not able to document the impression as the student reacts. So you have group reports, final exam, discussion. This is the discussion online. Final exam is individual, then of course you have group reports. I'll just give you some examples of what we do here. If you look at this as I walk through this, you'll realize that it's very, very the course requirements. In this class, they have a question of the week, which is the discussion board question, individual. And then you had a problem set. Remember the problem set I showed you earlier about Baldwin and the developing economies? That's the problem set, and that's a group work. And you have 40%, the exam is 40% the course grade, group project, 20, problem sets, and participation 40. 40, 40, 20. And the middle, as the teacher gives a grade to the problem set and the question of the week, your course site or your grading sheet in your LMS does this very well. Pagkatapos ng semester nyo, pag pinasok nyo yung final exams, tapos agad yung grado. Pwedeng i-pre-program sa LMS itong grading na ginawa nyo rito. Which can be done by the middle or can be done by the professor. Actually, down the road, it should be very easy to do that. I'd like you to look at this thing later on when I give you the readings. Because this one talks about ano bang standards na ginagamit na rito? Ba't ba na siya nagbibigay nitong problem set? Ba't siya nagbibigay ng discussion board? Yung question of the week. Okay. So dito nakalagay, you're required to submit one individual statement per week. No single posting should exceed 200 words. Rules like that. Why? Because again, some people will put up a lot, 2, 3, 10 pages trying to make it appear. Pag nilagay mo sa discussion board, samang basahin nung lampas ng 200 words sa discussion board. Yung problem set, may modification na pwedeng gawin dito. Pwedeng problem set, buong grupo mag-submit. Ang pwede rin gawin, yung grupo nagdi-discuss, pero individual submission. At dito sinabi niya, may be identical kung if you work together, you should indicate. Maximum 800 words. So dito, sa MS Word facility na word count, gamit na gamit mo to pagka ginagamit mo yan. Bago ka mag-post, nag-word count ka muna. Kasi pag hindi mo delimit yung word count na yan, mababaliw magbasa yung tao sa discussion board. Nakakaasar magbasa sa discussion board ng kaya haba-haba, wala naman sinasabi. Remember the group charter earlier? This one is prepared by the back room, by the people who do the design the course. On a per week basis, maliwanag per subject kung anong ginagawa. Para yung group, pag nag-meeting sa residency period, napaplot din nila to. Individual ba to o sama-sama? So, 3 subject, naka-plasta. These are aids to study. Remember, I always go back to that point. Blended learning is hard to prepare, easy to deploy if you do it well. Easy to deploy but hard to make. So clear delineation of time allotment. They need not follow this, but they can give them an idea. How much time will you take to read? How much time will you take to view the video? How much time will it take you to do this and that? You've got to give the students a guide. Why? Because remember, they're working. And across the courses that are deployed for that particular term, you've got to ask yourself, baka naman wala ng panahon itong mga estudyante itong matulog at magpahinga.